Yeah, so about this time of the semester, students are often wondering, so what does he want me to write about? What does the professor, what's he looking for, in this paper? And obviously I've given you some of the small things that should be in there. We've got to have an intro and a conclusion. You got to talk a little bit about the history and the industry and the strategy. And I wanted those added because I think they add context to what you're ultimately going to be writing about, and that's the finances, right? It's a business finance class, and so I want you to look at and spend a good portion of your paper writing about the finances. I mean, you can give me a paragraph on the history, you can give me a paragraph on the industry, a paragraph on the strategy, and paragraph for the intro, paragraph for the conclusion. That should leave you plenty of room in a 5-page paper to tell me about the finances, okay? And I've said before, you may want to break it down in different ways, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive either. You may want to do it by the financial statements that we have. You may want to do it chronologically or some combination, but find something that gives it some organization, okay? A very good share of you, I sent back comments on your outlines that you just didn't give me enough information to have an idea where you're going to take your paper. You might have had the bones of the outline there. I'm going to talk about the income statement, but you didn't add anything about your particular company yet, which makes me think that a lot of you haven't really started looking at your company yet. And so now it's time to dig in. Okay, you really got to dig in, and I'm going to give you just one short example here today, and I'll maybe try to send out some more, and I'll point you in the direction of some others as well. But again, my company, my example company that I've kind of picked, I've used throughout the semesters, WD-40 company. So in the Seeking Alpha, I went and plugged in, WD-40. That's their ticker symbol. Having a nice day today. Here's one hint. That does not matter. Okay, for your paper, I couldn't care less about what the stock price is or the share price is. Okay. The one exception might be when you make your recommendation, you might say something like, yeah, it's a good company, but I think the stock price is a little high at this time, which might be what I would say about WD-40. But in any event, okay, that doesn't really have anything to do with financial analysis. We're interested in seeing if this is a good company that's got good finances, got good things going on. So what do we do? So it comes up, and it generally comes up with this summary. And it's kind of cool looking at some of these things. I don't know necessarily that some of this stuff will end up in your final paper, but you're going to want to get it from the financials, where it gives us a little clearer look and a longer look, I should say. So you get some trends, right? Okay. And again, I kind of like looking at things like this. So I'm just going to kind of look at one example here today, and to try to keep this short, but give you guys some ideas about what you ought to be looking for. So this is where we start. Okay. So I look, and so far I've got this on absolute, so dollars. So I've seen that. Look at that. Their revenues have grown from 400 million probably, okay, to as of last year nearly 520. Okay, that's a pretty good growth. I might even want to calculate that from the end of 18. So that's 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 years of growth. I might want to calculate that and kind of see what that growth rate is. There might actually be some, if you click around enough on some of these, you might actually find it where it would tell you what the 3 or 4 or 5 year growth rate is. Okay. But sometimes this doesn't tell me enough, right? Their cost of revenues went up a lot too, right? 183 to 264, but does that make, I don't know, right? Their gross profit though went from 225 to only 254. Well, gosh, their revenues went up 110 million, but their gross profit only went up, 30? Not even quite 30? Something's weird. Let me take a look. So I like to flop or toggle, I'll call it. And let's see what's going on. Well, so their total revenues, boom, but their cost of revenues, a little less than 45%. Ooh, here it jumped up to 51% almost. And this wasn't bad. A little bit of an increase there, a little bit of an increase there, again a little bit of an increase, but that's a pretty good jump, okay? And so right away I'm kind of, what's going on here? How come their cost of revenues went up so much? And I'll constantly tell you that what you need to do often, and this should be probably one of your main sources. News sources are fine though. You might even be able to Google that and find out, why the WD-40's cost of goods sold go up so much in 2022. It might even take you, but I prefer to look at, go to the SEC filings, and what I'm looking for is the annual report. Well, there it is. There's the last annual report, and their annual report came out, October 24th, 22. That means that they've got one of those funky year ends. It probably end year end of September 30th or October 1st, something like that would be my guess. Okay, and I clicked on that, and I've already got that open. Oops, I got this over here. Let me go back here to my summary there. Okay, so let's open up that annual report. View it as a PDF, and if I were you, I'd go back maybe and see if you could get a few years back, okay, and take a look at those types of things. So I got to come back up here, right? At the top, it's WD-40. Boom. I'm gonna scroll down because we get to about the third or fourth page, and we got a nice little table of contents here, and you got selected financial data and management's discussion and analysis. Oh man, analysis of financial condition. Is that what we're looking for? Yeah. And these kind of start on page 17, goes to 33, so it's not a ton of pages, that sometimes we got to dig a little deeper, I admit that, but for now I'm going to just click on that. And selected financial data is just one sentence basically. But then we get to management's discussion. And what is it that I'm looking for? Why'd their cost of goods sold go up so much? Okay. And I've already kind of looked at this, so I know where it's at, but you'll probably have to read through it a little bit, the company highlights. And in this case, this is right up here. Okay. My answer is going to be right here. More often, you're probably going to have to come down to where I'm going to scroll down a little bit here. Yeah, they'll have this kind of a graph or a table, and the answer might be down here, okay? But let me go back up, and for this particular question, oops, that was on page 17 or 18, sorry. I jump around a little bit, get you guys all confused, sorry about that, but right, okay. Gross profit as a percentage of net sales decreased to 49.1% compared to 54%. So, right, I go back to that gross profit on the financials. Okay, so again, I want to hit this absolute and change that to percentage. So, yeah, so they went from 54.03. Back here, they were up at 55. But down to this 49.1, and that's what they're telling us here, right? Okay, which is, it's the inverse of that cost of revenues then, right? Okay, and so gross profit decreased primarily due to ongoing global supply chain challenges, including the increased costs, et cetera, right? Couple of sentences there. Okay, and that answered my question, and that's kind of what I'm looking at for the financial analysis. That could make this attractive, then if they're able to reverse that, right? And they could add that 5% back to their gross profit. If we look again, take it back to the absolute, you add 5% to that, and that's going to add another 25 million or so back to this gross profit, which, for this company would be very sizable, very nice, right? And I'm looking at some relatively big changes here, okay? I want to emphasize that I know one of you has chosen Walmart, right? And you're analyzing Walmart. Well, Walmart might be trying to change this number by a 0.5% or 1%, because Walmart sells, they got $518 million in sales. Walmart has, 500 and probably $18 billion in sales per year. If they can improve their gross profit by 1%, that's $5 billion. Okay? If they can improve their operating expenses by that, holy cow, that's just awesome. Okay? And so, keep in mind when you're analyzing your company that even though this is a pretty big percent change, I was able to find that pretty easily. But for other companies, just 1% or so could be a huge item that you might want to take a look at. Scroll down just a little bit more and add to this. So either selling and so even though their cost of goods went up, they were able to offset that some, right, by reducing their selling, general, and administrative expenses, by about 3 percentage points there. Looks like here with the trailing 12 months that has popped back up a little bit, but nevertheless that kind of offset that a little bit. So they had here's a 6% drop in gross profit, but their operating income dropped from 19.2 to 16, almost 17. So a 2.5% drop in overall operating income. Yeah, so they offset that somewhat. That's not bad. And again, I'd go back to that annual report, and for brevity's sake, I'm not going to do that today, but I'd go back to that annual report and I'd find out, how are they able to reduce their selling, general, and administrative expenses? Okay, they've probably done some things. This year here, that's a high. They went from 36 almost, or 35 and a half down to 32. So 3.5% from this year to this year in terms of dropping those expenses. So they obviously tightened some things up, and I'd want to go back to that annual report and find those. And again, for brevity's sake, I'm not going to do that today. So those are the things to look for. Now, let me emphasize, however, okay, I was talking about one item that I found interesting that certainly needs to be reported on, but I got to report this. We've had a good growth of revenue. I got to report on that, right? Okay. And the cost of revenues, I'm going to report on that, and that's going to take me there too. And selling in general and administrative expenses, they've gone from 144 to 166. That's not bad, but again, as a percentage, it's actually decreased, which is good. Okay. And so don't miss the obvious too, right? You need to tell me about the obvious things, like in this case, the growth of the revenue. Okay. And there'll be other things. We'll take a look at balance sheet and cash flow items here in the days ahead. But, take a look at those things. Make sure that you put the obvious in there. But then if there's things that jump out, like in this case, the gross profit item or the cost of goods sold, if those things jump out, they definitely need to be reported. But believe me, when I'm correcting or reviewing, evaluating your final paper, I'm going to have this open. I'm going to be looking at it. I'm going to open up the annual reports. I'm going to be looking at those, okay, and making sure that you're kind of hitting some of these important things. So hopefully that gives you one idea, gives you a start. I want to look at something else. Okay, if we go to the content and we go to project 2, and you got to scroll down. I got so darn many videos and stuff in here, but you'll see I've got some other annual reports that you could look at. How to find and use a 10K, which is basically the annual report's called the 10K, right? Some companies that I've looked at in the past: Starbucks, Nvidia, Malibu Boats. Okay, talk about other income and goodwill, and I may update some things like that, but these are not. These are dated. These I've did in the past, but just give you some other good examples of things you can look at and things that should give you some direction for writing this final paper. So thanks. I better call it quits. I've been babbling long enough here. Have a great day.